Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. Washington Bureau Chief for the Huffington Post, Ryan Grimm. Welcome to the program, Ryan.
Good to be here, Sam.
Let me start with these speeches last night because I was completely befuddled by these dual, speeches, or addresses by first President Obama. He came down that red carpet. What's that called? Is that Chinese Man Theater?
I believe so.
Okay, so he walks down the red carpet. He comes up to, and he is speaking as if to essentially an audience that has not been following this, it seems, at all. Is that an accurate assessment? I mean, both he and Boehner seem to be talking about as if this has just sort of come up.
Yeah, Obama used the phrase, this thing called the debt ceiling. You know, most Americans have an opinion on whether and how it should be raised, but at least according to pollsters. But yeah, you're right on. Both of them talked to people like they were kids who just showed up for like Sunday school.
And so, and let me ask you this: So President Obama came out, and he was very much he embraced Boehner here. He specifically blamed, essentially, he didn't name it, but the Tea Party caucus in the House. Mm-hmm. He said the words balanced approach 6 times over the course of whatever, his 5 or 7 minute, 12-minute address. And what's he going for here?
Well, you know, it almost looks like, and I hope this isn't the case, but it looks like he was setting up failure. You know, he was trying to make it clear to the American people that if this whole thing goes down, it's not his fault. It seems like he wants to sound like the reasonable guy. Look at what I've offered, balance, and they refuse to take it. And so when this ship goes down, don't blame me. And in fact, there's going to be a guy on right after me. And Boehner almost made his case for him.
Right. I mean, and he's responsible. But the one thing that sort of mystifies me on this, and it almost suggests to me that he may be making another speech, is that he came out and he kept talking about revenue increases, right? He wanted a balanced approach, revenue increases and cuts. But earlier in the day, Harry Reid came out with a proposal that had $2.7 trillion in cuts and no revenue increases, and the White House said that they could live with that. Why didn't he bring that up? I mean, is he basically keeping some of his powder dry to come back in 5 days and say, okay, today is the disaster day, we're willing to take $2.7 trillion in cuts, and they still say no?
Yeah, I really think that his speech only makes sense in the context of default, because you're right, the timeline doesn't make sense. In the morning, he says, "Yes, I'm okay with this deal. That would be all tax cut, all cuts, no revenues." And then in the evening, he goes back to pushing for this grand bargain. So it seems like that's what he's doing. That he's framing, who gets blamed for this thing going down.
And then Boehner came up. He didn't talk any specifics too, and basically he seemed to be talking to a completely different constituency. He's worried about a revolt in his own party, isn't he?
It seemed, you're exactly right. It's a strange thing to do, to go on national TV and talk to an entire nation when your only audience is the 80-some Tea Party folks in your caucus. Like, why not just meet them in the basement of the Capitol and speak directly to them? And I guess the answer to that is that he wants them to see that he's not BSing them behind closed doors. That this is the message that he's taking to the to the entire country. So, but it was kind of a scary little talk that he gave, because it's hard to see how those two sides, Obama then followed by Boehner, how in a couple of days those two are going to be reconciled. He really stuck a flag in the ground there.
Yeah, and he also broke the first rule of addressing the Tea Party on national TV. Aren't you supposed to speak into a camera to the right of the one that's actually filming you?
Yes, or above it, or you definitely don't look directly into the camera. That was a bit strange.
That was the most disconcerting thing. I mean, he was talking to the Tea Party people and he was looking almost directly into the camera. But but is this a function of the fact that he came out with his plan, which is which I want you to delineate the Reids Plan and the Boehner Plan for me. But my understanding is that was more or less rejected by the House Tea Party caucus.
Yeah, it was. They don't. It's not enough for them. They don't want a few $1 trillion in cuts and the promise of a vote on a constitutional amendment. Damn it, they want basically the whole government cut now, and they want their constitutional amendment to be part of the Constitution by next Tuesday. And so anything short of that is something that they're going to reject, and they did reject it. And then Reid comes back with this. Here's your $2.7 trillion in cuts, a $2.5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. It's everything you've asked for, and they're in the position of looking crazy for not taking it. Now, there's one spot where Boehner seems to have blundered, and that's starting to become more apparent today. By constantly dogging the president for not leading and saying, "Look, we're leaders. We're the ones that are presenting plans." That means that he has to go forward with his plan. And so Wednesday and Thursday, there are going to be votes in the House on the House plan. And because he has to do this, because he has put so many marbles in this bag of I'm the leader. Then it goes over to the Senate where it gets squashed. Then Reid passes his reasonable-looking legislation, and then it's up to the House to either pass it or not pass it. And that puts all the onus on the House. And in Washington, the last bill standing is the one that usually becomes law. And so Boehner, by his bragging about how he's the leader, has been forced to lead. And the people that are behind him are the ones that are probably going to be able to push their bill over the finish line. So he kind of screwed himself here by getting too far out in front of the process.
Okay.
And at least that's how it looks now. It's impossible to say what's going to happen.
Right.
It's total chaos. But that's the way it seems to be sifting out today.
All right. I want to break down the actual two different plans because there's some very subtle differences when you look at it from afar. But as you get closer, they're pretty significant differences. But basically, what you're saying is that because this is sort of like the reverse of the tic-tac-toe I play with my daughter. In this case, because he goes first. It's going to be back on the House. At the end of the day, it's going to be back on the House to reject or accept a bill that could come out of the Senate, which would be Harry Reid's bill. And if the House, basically, they'll take the last vote before default. Is that basically what it comes down to?
Yep, and that's the position that if you're Reid that you want to be in. And Reid, for all you can say about him, is a master legislative and parliamentary tactician, and he seems to have outmaneuvered Boehner on this one.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we don't.
And McConnell, he had McConnell's help too.
Right. Well, to be fair, we don't know if Boehner has been sober the whole way, and we can only imagine if Boehner was sober, he might be doing a little bit better. So I don't want to make any judgment here on anybody, but let's
fair enough.
break down for me Harry Reid's plan. He's got it's $2.7 trillion of cuts. Where do the cuts come from?
Most of the cuts do not come from Social Security or Medicare or other entitlement programs.
Or Medicaid, right? Or Medicaid.
Or Medicaid, right. And they come from discretionary spending. They nickel and dime their way to getting to $1 trillion some dollars. Then they factor in a certain amount of interest saved by not having spent those nickels and dimes.
About $400 billion.
Something like that, and then they factor in about $1 trillion or so in savings from going to war a little bit less over the next decade.
Right.
And so with that, you get to $2.7 trillion.
Okay, so you got $1 trillion predicated on the ending of Afghanistan and Iraq wars. You've got $400 billion off of the savings on interest because you're not borrowing the money, and then another 1.3 or so comes from $300 billion comes from cutting out fraud. I don't know why we've been doing the whole fraud thing. That should never be a line item in any budget, as far as I'm concerned.
But you have a fraud lobby that is very strong in Washington. So they're going to.
I know one of them became governor of Florida, is my understanding.
That's right.
But okay, so we cut that out, and then he also has, and you were one of the first, if not the first, to report on this. He has the inclusion of the Super Congress, but it's slightly different than Boehner's Super Congress. Break down Reid's Super Congress.
Right. Both have a Super Congress, and both would work in similar ways, where you'd have it's a 12-member bicameral body where you've got 6 folks from the Senate, 6 from the House, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, and you would need 7 votes for them to pass legislation. That legislation would then be rammed through Congress, fast-tracked in a matter of days. It couldn't be amended up or down. It could just be voted on. And once you've got the leaderships behind this, it's a fait accompli. They're going to deliver this.
My understanding is that there's no filibustering this either, right, in the Senate?
Right. Okay. Exactly. All of a sudden, all the arguments that you've been hearing about the filibuster and Senate traditions and whatever have you, they don't apply anymore. Now there's a key difference between.
Now wait a second. Let me just do one more. Let me clarify one more thing too. When you talk about legislation, you're essentially talking about cuts, and a lot of people are concerned. And the idea is that these cuts, they could be Social Security, they could be Medicare, they could be Medicaid, they could be anything essentially, and they are not subject to a filibuster. They're not subject to amendments, and it really is. There are 2 important elements. One is who sits on that this high commission of Super Congress, and then the other part, the difference between Reid and Boehner's plan is
Boehner's would be tied to default. Now, Reid would extend the debt ceiling past the election, so that you wouldn't have to monkey around with this debate again. Boehner, however, would only authorize about $1 trillion slightly and change increase in the debt ceiling, which means that, say, 6 months-ish, sometime after that, a year from now, we'd have to come back to this debate, and the only way that Congress could vote on raising the debt ceiling again is if they first passed the legislation, not recommendations, the legislation that comes from this Super Congress. So it would be this hostage situation just magnified exponentially. If you don't pass this, not only do you have to have a fast track vote, not only can you not filibuster it, not only can you not amend it, but if you don't pass it, you can't raise the debt ceiling.
That's just a massive difference. I mean, one is that there's a tremendous, in the Boehner plan, there's a lot of leverage here to pass this thing. Not only is the threshold lower, but there's a tremendous amount of leverage on the Boehner thing. On Reid's proposal, there is no leverage, and so they could say we're going to cut X, Y, or Z, but you need just basically an up or down vote to quash this thing in the Senate.
Or you would need all 6 Democrats on the Super Congress to just refuse to do anything. If they did that in the Boehner situation, then default would be the result. In the Reid situation, it would just be a bunch of wasted meetings and stale Chinese food.
Right. Okay. So that's a big difference. And despite that fact, the Republican Boehner's caucus has rejected it.
Right. They said that commissions like this in the past have been vehicles that have been used to raise taxes. The Greenspan commission back in '83 that extended the life of Social Security by making some tweaks and raising some taxes here and there is, I guess, something that they don't like. That's an example of something that didn't work for them because it involved some tiny amount of tax increases. So, yeah, to them, this isn't good enough. And some Tea Party members certainly have some reservations about creating this this super legislative body, that because they talked a huge game in 2009 and 2010 about closed-door meetings and democracy.
SARS, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all you need to do is call this Super Congress the Super Tsar Congress or something, and then
Right.
that it's the poison pill. Oh, I lost him. We'll call him right back. Sorry. Yeah, sometimes we have technical difficulties.
It happens.
Yeah.
Wasn't my fault, but it
No.
happens.
The real question is, will he answer his phone? Keep the volume up so I can hear this. Let's just...
Hello?
Hi, sorry,
we
we
go.
had a little bit of technical difficulties on our end.
Yep.
So you could call it the Super Tsar Congress, and that's the poison pill. It can never exist. But wait, let me ask you this, all right? Because I consider myself someone who is not in any way hesitant to classify Republicans and particularly Tea Party people as completely batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that understanding, I do not understand why they are rejecting the Boehner plan. Because, you can look back at that Greenspan Commission. All they did was essentially raise taxes not on poor people, but on poor people and middle-class people. And they could always reject this. They have the majority in the House. If this Super Tsar Commission came up with this, what is their end game here? I mean, are we at the point now where there is absolutely no cohesion on the Republican side whatsoever? I mean, there is no bullying, there is nothing. It's simply every man for himself at this point.
Yeah, I was talking to a top House Republican aide very early in this Congress, and he said something that stuck with me. That he said, we're in a position where we can get tremendous and unprecedented concessions from Democrats. We can see it before us. But the question for us is, are we going to be able to persuade our freshmen to take them? And that's always been the tension. I think part of what's happening is that these freshman Republicans have really bought the lines that the Republicans in Washington have been using for years. They've really internalized that the elites in Washington lie to you, that the game is rigged, that you can't make a difference, that that it's this is the way that Washington works, et cetera, et cetera. And they showed that early on when they rejected the Leadership's Patriot Act vote, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
They were told, look, this is just three little provisions of it. It's just a 3-month extension, please. We need this. It's a really big deal. Just trust us. And the freshmen said, no, we don't trust you. So they've really internalized this distrust of institutions that the Republicans have been preaching for a couple of decades now, and it's coming home to roost now. In that Boehner and Cantor and McCarthy are saying, look, this is an amazing deal. You're not going to get anything better than this. And they're like, we don't believe you.
It's like they all have rabies. It's like literally you have a rabid raccoon, you put a plate of food in front of it, and it just sort of like thinks it's poop. I mean, it's bizarre. Well, let me ask you this, and because that's to me the most underreported story here is that this is not unlike what happened with immigration. I think I guess 4 years ago now, where the sort of the electoral the lies and the red meat they'd been feeding the electoral base, they've created these Frankensteins, and they're even less sort of like coherent than Frankenstein in some respects. But where does anybody know where the Republican presidential hopefuls are on this?
They seem to have as much respect. The freshmen have as much respect for these presidential hopefuls as they have for their leadership, which is very, very little. There's little incentive for these candidates to weigh in here.
Have they been pressed on it? I mean, it seems this would be the number one. I mean, this is the most relevant thing for these guys, right? I mean, is there going to be a default? I mean, what's going to happen presumably in a year if you're president, or a year and a half if you're president, and this debt ceiling thing comes up?
Well, Bachmann has been pressed on it, and she's she's in the House, so we'll weigh in on it. And she has said that she'd vote against it basically no matter what. So she's staking it out on the far right. I don't know what a President Bachmann would do if she had to raise the debt ceiling.
Well, she'd just go ahead and do it, and we'd all pretend like this never happened.
Right, right, exactly. And the others have taken extreme positions, but with an out where they say that they'd like they want these types of cuts, etc. They're not at the table, and they don't have to vote, so it's kind of an easier situation for them to be in. Because they know that what they say doesn't have much consequence.
Interesting.
And all these folks see themselves as the next president, and know that they'll have to deal with this
right.
as
they
well.
don't want to foreclose their opportunity to get just a clean debt ceiling vote.
Right.
All right. So what else? I mean, where do you think this goes? I mean, is your sense that there's not going to be a deal at all?
I mean, there is a very strong possibility that there's no deal. I think that the administration in that case would find some way to avoid default. I don't know how. They've ruled out the 14th Amendment so many times. It'd be hard for them to do that. But the Times had an op-ed from some legal scholars the other day saying that you could just cite the necessary clause in there, the same way that Lincoln, who is Obama's hero, did with suspending habeas corpus. But I think that there is a decent chance that the House will pass or the House won't pass. Like, there's a chance that Boehner will lose the vote because Democrats are going to, rally against this.
Right.
And if Boehner loses enough members of his own conference, he could actually not get his thing through the House. At which point the Reid and McConnell can just run the table on him. But even if he does get it through, the Senate will then quickly squash it. Then the Senate, with McConnell's help, will pass this $2.7 trillion in cuts thing, and then it'll be up to the House, and that'll be Boehner's moment where he has to decide: do I want to help? Do I want to put this on the floor and try to pass it with Democrats and Republicans working together, or do I want to keep it from the floor? Now, what he could do is put it on the floor, say that this is the Democratic thing to do. I'm voting against this. I think this is terrible, but I'm going to put it on the floor and then allow his folks behind the scenes to try to whip up, say 100, 110 Republican votes and 100, 110 Democratic votes, and then you've got it. And then he hopes that there's no revolt in his conference over that.
I mean, if he puts it on the floor, he is done as Speaker of the House, isn't he? I mean, will there not? Isn't that Cantors? I mean, isn't that Cantors' wet dream right there? I mean, isn't that what he's waiting for? The bill goes from the Senate, the McConnell or the Reid bill with McConnell's blessing goes from the Senate to the House, and Boehner says, "I'll put it on the floor. I'll put it up to a vote. I'm going to vote against it." And all of the Tea Party caucus votes against it. Some of the moderate Republicans, if there are any, I don't know if there are any enough, basically, to join with the Democrats to pass it. It passes, and Cantor basically becomes Speaker.
I mean, there's a scenario that, the one you laid out is plausible. It's also possible that the freshmen would realize that they don't have it, and they can't overthrow him. But there's no shortage of members of his conference who are, would be happy to see that happen. But there are others who recognize the value of having Boehner up there, and maybe they'll let him stay there for a while before throwing him overboard. It's hard to say, right. But you're right. I mean, that's Boehner's huge problem that he's facing.
One final question for you on the 14th Amendment. Has the Office of Legal Counsel weighed in on this? I know that we've heard from Geithner. I know that we've heard from the administration, but has the Office of Legal Counsel weighed in? Because ultimately that would be the fig leaf if Obama had to come on TV again, walk down the red carpet and say, look, we've tried everything. It hasn't passed. And the Justice Department has told me that it is my obligation constitutionally, as I'm not making a choice here, it's my obligation constitutionally to invoke the 14th Amendment, fourth clause of the 14th Amendment, and I have to do this.
I think that the closer it gets to collapse, the more likely something like that is. He said in College Park the other day, asked about this, and he gets asked about it wherever he goes. He said, our people have looked into it, which I assume means Office of Legal Counsel, but they haven't commented one way or another on whether or not the OLC has actually drafted a memo or what. He said, my folks don't think that's a winning argument, I think was his phrase. But it's not an argument.
Right.
It's a power struggle. He lays it down. He says, I'm doing this. The professors can go ahead and argue it out. He'll have experts on his side. They'll have experts on their side. It then becomes a power struggle over whether they want to actually try to impeach the president over paying bills. And I think that's a political argument that he wins hands down.
Right. I agree with that. All right. Well, Ryan Grim, thank you so much. I know I kept you longer than I said I would, but I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
It's just this is one of the most bizarre periods of politics in years and years, as far as I can tell. It is so strange, so strange, and
the whole thing's made up.
It is just bizarre. It is like. It's just layers and layers of theater, and I don't know what to make of it. Ryan Grim, thank you so much for joining us.